All right, good. Well, we're thankful for the crowd. Really happy that everyone came here tonight. I'm just going to wing this. You get things prepared and then you forget, you know what, I didn't get a bio on Debra. So I'm just going to have to do it off the cuff. Most of you will probably remember her, probably know her, as the dark horse candidate that was in the gubernatorial race 4 years ago against Rick Perry and Kay Bailey Hutchison. My opinion, she's settled back on her heels. Man, she can hold her own. And she garnered almost 20% of the vote, which for a virtually unknown was really, really good. That was not enough to win, but it certainly made a dent and caused people to recognize her. I've known her for about 7 years. Some of the things that she's strongest in has worked diligently to and has gotten some state representatives all over in the Texarkana area. Forgotten the man's name, starts with a V, I believe. She'll tell you about it later. I know among, I think, others that are helping in this problem we've got with property tax. My opinion, I think that and so many others, you own it. You shouldn't have to be in a position of fear of losing that because of being unable to pay property tax somewhere along the line. That's just, and man, a lot of people identify with that, and Debra has been at the forefront on that forever. Eminent domain abuses, property rights, man, another strong one for her. Tax reform, gun rights, others. Anyway, so, and obviously running for state comptroller right now. Well, without any further ado, let's welcome Debra Medina.
Thank you, Rick. I'm not sure how all this came together out here. Rick and I probably talked a few weeks ago, and I told him I was going to be out in West Texas again, and he said, let's do something in Lubbock, and I said, let's do. And boy, he's the kind of grassroots volunteer you hope to have all over the state, because he organized, I did 3 radio interviews, as he mentioned this morning, and television this afternoon, and this event here tonight. I really appreciate y'all taking the time to come out. This is an election cycle unlike one we've ever seen in Texas, where we have contested Republican primary races for the leadership of our state. We've never been here before, and it's causing, I think, a little bit of angst around the state. The pundits who would tell you they absolutely know what's going to happen don't really know what's happening. And I believe voters, if you're not already, are ducking for cover. You're so inundated with campaign advertisements from so many different people that most of the voters don't know. I've been struggling with this race because I'm susceptible to, believe it or not, every now and then to the rhetoric that floats around, and we're told if you don't have a whole lot of money you can't win as a candidate. And boy, I couldn't find that extra money that I thought we needed, and I just was reluctant to get into this race. I knew I would be the best candidate, and I knew I'd lead on the issues, and thought I needed all that money. And over the Christmas holidays, it occurred to me that I've been campaigning statewide for 5 years. Started in 2009, all of 9, all of 10, all of 11, all of 12, all of 13, going into 14. This is my 6th year to be doing this. I thought shoe leather and elbow grease. Charles pointed out maybe it's bald tires on the car. I'm on my 2nd car, if that counts. We spent nearly $950,000 on these ideas. Not on Debra Medina, but on a set of ideas and principles that we believe ought to be prevailing in Texas public policy. So I'm here again, running on those same ideas. I said I'm going to pull hard to the right on free market ideas. And I'll work with whoever that leadership team is, but somebody is going to defend those principles, and I won't win all those arguments, but you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to make the argument, and I'm going to present the case for limited government and free market ideology, and we've got that missing in our leadership in Austin right now, by and large. So where are we? Biggest state in the union, biggest economy, greatest number of natural resources, tremendous human capital. Texas is the best state in the union, right?
Yeah.
But there is another side to the story, right? There's more to the story. What's the rest of the story? 35% of our state budget is federal tax dollars. When we talk about weaning ourselves away from Washington, D.C., how hard is that to do if fully 1/3 of all of the state government service that we provide in this state is coming from Washington, D.C.? We've got to have leadership that really begins to say, how do we start to take care of ourselves? Why on earth? I know the federal government takes a lot of our money and a lot of our resources. I get that. But we better get some leadership that starts to look at, they're in trouble. Have you noticed? How many of us believe the federal government is going bankrupt? Is already bankrupt? How long are they going to be able to continue that gravy train? And when it stops, what condition is our state going to be in if we have not even begun to ask the question, how do we do it without Washington, D.C.? And we don't have anybody who's seriously asking that question right now. Do you know that in our statute, there's some language that says the Texas State Comptroller may accept federal funds? Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that, I think it also says may not. Because if it says may, then it means may not. We have somebody that says, no, the state of Texas will not be accepting that money under those conditions. This is a two-way street. And when we have an agreement like that, then by golly, we get to negotiate some of these terms, and the terms y'all trying to shove down our throat are completely unacceptable. And when we begin to have state leaders who talk to the public of Texas and let you know what kind of conditions they're shoving at us instead, I like that sign over there, no sniveling. Every time Washington gives us something, what do we snivel like a bunch of snot-nosed kids saying, well, they just made us do this, and we have... Where's our spine? We have a Texas congressional delegation. One of the largest in the country, isn't it? What are they good for? We start pushing them to negotiate on behalf of the state of Texas. We have a comptroller that says we're not taking that money with those conditions. We start to push back and we figure out how we start to protect and preserve and wean ourselves away from Washington, D.C. We have a broken tax system. Y'all know I've been working for the elimination of property tax for a long time. I can make the argument on the ideas of what's difference between a free people and one that lives impoverished. Private property ownership is at the heart of that question. But beyond that, our Texas State Comptroller was charged by the legislature a number of sessions ago with doing an audit of the central appraisal districts in Texas, and 60 of the districts failed that original audit. I've said publicly that's criminal. What do you mean, Debra, they failed the audit? Well, they couldn't reproduce the property value. Put a $150,000 value on your house, auditor goes in and says, how did you come up with $150,000? And we can't get back to 150. It might be 162 this time, or it might be 112. We don't really know how we got 150. We just got 150. Who's least able to defend against that bad number? Those least able are most victimized, aren't they? You know, if you know something about property value and the appraisal review board and the process, you can go fight for yourself. But if you're a single mom or single parent or young family working 3 jobs to try to make, used to be 2, now it's 3 or 4 jobs to try to make ends meet, who has time for that malarkey? And so your government knows that they're just going to take that money from you, aren't they? And you're not going to be able to fight it. It's criminal. So we've got to fix that system. But beyond the brokenness of the tax system, what's the Texas economy doing right now? Barely crawling along or blowing and going? We're blowing and going, aren't we? We got revenue coming in hand over fist. Haven't seen it this good in 20 years. Do you know that in the state of Texas, we have the second highest local debt burden in the country?
Yes.
Second highest in the country. What does that mean? Well, that means that our local governments aren't pay-as-you-go. You know the state's not pay-as-you-go. We haven't funded new road development out of current revenue in a long time. We keep putting that on bonds. We've got a big amount of debt at the state level, and we've got the second highest local debt burden in the country. If we can't pay as we go right now, when the economy's good, if we're putting it on debt right now that our kids and our grandkids are going to be paying off, what's going to happen to them when the economy slows down? How bad are we going to be? So our tax structure is broken. This isn't the effect of not enough jobs and not enough things going on in the economy to provide for ourselves. This is the effect, I believe, of years of cronyism in Austin. This is the effect of not understanding the principles of free market. We say we're pro-business. We need to be talking about being pro-free markets. There's a difference, apparently. And we haven't had, I think, the intellectual debate to have that discussion. Another radio personality, he dropped in for a little bit earlier this evening. I said, he said, do you have a favorite in some of these other races? And I said, look, my job will be to work with whoever the leadership team of Texas is. I can just promise you this. Whoever that new leadership team is going to be, I'm going to be the one, because there isn't anybody else in these statewide offices that's an advocate of true free market ideas. When the economy's good, if we're putting it on debt right now that our kids and our grandkids are going to be paying off, what's going to happen to them when the economy slows down? How bad are we going to be? So our tax structure is broken. This isn't the effect of not enough jobs and not enough things going on in the economy to provide for ourselves. This is the effect, I believe, of years of cronyism in Austin. This is the effect of not understanding the principles of free market. We say we're pro-business. We need to be talking about being pro-free markets. There's a difference, apparently. And we haven't had, I think, the intellectual debate to have that discussion. So we don't move from this cronyist system that we have now back to a purely free market system overnight, but we better have somebody that starts advocating for and articulating those ideas. And so I said in this campaign, Debra, why the Comptroller's office? Why do you see that as a place? Well, clearly, the Comptroller is the keeper of the Treasury for Texas. The Comptroller is the agency that goes into all of these legislative committee hearings and provides expert testimony to the legislators. As critical as we want to be, and Charles, I've been saying this all over the state, not just because you're here, as critical as we want to be of the legislators, I think we also have to cut these men and women some slack. Nobody goes to Austin to serve as a public official wanting to hurt the state of Texas. Nobody does that. Nobody goes down there wanting to just line their own pockets. They go because they want to serve. And they get there and they have thousands of bills, literally thousands of bills come across their desk. There's no way that they can have subject matter expertise on all of the things that come to them. Impossible. I think they think they're making really good decisions. The Comptroller, on the other hand, is there 365 days a year, has an agency of 2,700 full-time employees. Who's best suited to be the expert on tax and fiscal matters if it's not the Comptroller's agency? We've got to have an agency that understands the job of going, not only reporting what is, but I think giving some context to these proposals. Many of you will know that I'm a registered nurse by profession, and so I've been for 20 plus years talking to people about healthcare choices. And if you're a really good healthcare professional, you're able to separate yourself from the decision that the patient makes. I know darn good and well what would be best for you healthcare-wise. But you know what? I really do believe in patient rights. I'm a strong advocate for good health policy, but it is your body and your life. And my job is not to make you feel guilty because you made a bad decision. My job is to say, this is what you can expect if you do this, and this is what you might be able to expect if you do that. And I think absolutely the Comptroller ought to be doing that same sort of thing when it comes to fiscal and tax policy. Not just, well, this is going to bring in $5 and we're going to lose $2 over here, but this moves us towards a greater free market, or we might consider that while this policy may create 6 jobs over here, it's going to cost 30 over there, or it's going to affect other businesses in the community this way, or it's going to shift the tax burden from those 3 people to those 10 people. We're not seeing or hearing those sorts of contextual guidance being given to the legislators when they're asked to consider. All we hear is the why it's good. And when we turn to the Comptroller's office or to the Comptroller's representative there, they are giving these very narrow, just the numbers sorts of guidance to the legislature. And so I'd advocate that we need to be a good advocate. We need the Comptroller to be a strong advocate, not just to give us the numbers, but to give some guidance about what's the overall effect of this, to give some concept, some might say some dynamic analysis about what does this mean, so that we begin to get better tax policy. I've been working on this office, if you will, seeing, I've been advocating for better public policy for 20 years. Ran for governor, now we're advocating on a little bit broader stage. Didn't win that race. Young man out of Fort Worth, I heard him say about a lost campaign one time, what would we have done if we had won, and why aren't we doing that? If you believe in the ideas that you're campaigning for, whether you win or lose, if you believed in the ideas, you ought to continue to fight for the ideas. And so I've taken that advice to heart, and I've continued to fight for the ideas, but I'd like to see those ideas implemented. And so every election cycle, you got to reevaluate, well, how else can I advance these ideas? And advancing them through the Comptroller's office is something that's been on my radar screen for about 3 years now. And so I've been talking to business people all around the state, trying to understand what they saw as the areas where the agency is doing a good job, and where does the agency maybe need to improve. And one of the things that we're hearing consistently is that there's no consistency. You know, the Comptroller is not the policymaker. May be able to influence policy, but at the end of the day, the job of the Comptroller is to enforce the tax statutes that are on the books. And those statutes need to be enforced consistently. The taxpayers need to understand how they're going to be enforced so that they can plan for their business. And what we're hearing from businesses all over the state is that that interpretation changes from quarter to quarter. You might call up there this quarter and ask for some guidance about how the tax statute is going to apply to your business, and you do your tax planning in accord with that, and next quarter the interpretation is different, and without much notice to the taxpayer, the tables are turned significantly. I understand regulatory environments. I've been a manager in healthcare for a number of years. There may be no more highly regulated environment in our country than, I think, healthcare and nuclear power are apparently the two most highly regulated industries that there are. There is a need to have people in office who understand how to read statutes, who understand how administrative policies and laws are written, and who can also recognize that we sometimes have court cases that cause us to go back and revisit how we're interpreting those things and make sure that we have some clear and open communication with taxpayers in Texas. So while there's lots of policy ideas that I can talk to you about, and I've skimmed the surface of those this evening, we are primarily talking about in this campaign having a comptroller who will be fair, accurate, and trustworthy. And I'm going to continue to talk about those things working all around Texas. I think it's important for you to know, and maybe I touched on this at the beginning of my remarks, that I've been campaigning statewide going into my 6th year now. We've spent $900,000 on these issues and ideas. I remain concerned that our race would be a whole lot easier if we had a whole lot more money in the bank, but I don't want you to make that the barometer by which you determine whether or not we're going to be successful. These are winning ideas. I'm a strong candidate. We demonstrated that. Y'all helped me demonstrate that 4 years ago. But there was some polling done at the end of October. It was released. It was statewide public polling. It was released in early November. I think it really caused people to go, oh my goodness. There's some staying power there. The University of Texas, Texas Tribune polled a number of statewide races. Now remember what was happening at the end of October. Finally, through 3 special sessions of the legislature, all of these candidates that are running for statewide office are now beginning to get out. They started working in the state August. They worked August, September, October. This poll's done at the end of October. And when you got down to the comptroller's race, guess who had a 10-point lead? And so folks went, wow, that's not what we expected. She didn't have any money. How come she's 10 points ahead? There haven't been any other statewide polls, but I can tell you that there have been a number. I know that there was one particular pollster that polled about 20 Texas House districts on January 11th. The number of undecideds in Texas has dropped from 75% to now 50%, and I'm still leading with 10 and 12 and 14 points in all of those districts. So don't you believe for a second the idea that you have to have a whole bunch of money between August and March. If that's your view, if that's the viewfinder you're looking through, you're missing a big part of the picture, right? The big picture is we've been campaigning on these ideas. We've been most of us have probably been spreading these ideas in our own sphere of influence for 20 years, right? We just have felt like we haven't had leadership in Austin that's doing it. And for whatever reason, we're in a place today where I've been able to continue to do that with your support. I'm going to continue to pull really hard for those ideas of limited governments, free markets, and true private property ownership. Maybe I get to take on some gun ownership issues and some other fiscal investment issues and some gold issues, and there's just a whole slew of things that I think we should be and could be doing as a state. But right now we got to get through March 4th, in a winning position, and in order to do that, I need this area of the state. West Texas was strong for me 4 years ago. I need it to be strong for me again. We've got good tools and resources available to you. If you can help the campaign, please sign up to do so, and we'll put you in touch with people that can help you work. The best thing you can do for us is talk to your neighbors that you know vote. I'm telling people now's not the time to convince people who don't vote to vote. Worry about the people who vote. There's 1.5 million Texans who will vote in the Republican primary. Talk to those people. Get your county's voter list and look at who votes in primaries and talk to those people. Talk to them about this race, the importance of the comptroller's race, and what it will mean for the future of Texas. Get them to vote. Go out and work your early voting polling places. We're hoping to have Medina campaign supporters at every early voting polling location. During early voting, 50% of the vote is cast then. You'd be amazed how many people go vote and have no idea who they're voting for. And so a presence at that early voting location can be very effective. And we'll see where we are on March the 4th. Do you have any questions for me about this race and what needs to happen in Texas?
Do you have material to hand out door to door?
We do. We've got a stack of cards back there, and part of what we realized, Jane, in the last election cycle is that in a campaign like ours where you have so few resources, you can spend a lot there. And out here in West Texas, probably more so than in any other part of the state, y'all were great at taking stuff and doing what needed to be done. And so we've got some printed material here tonight, but mostly what we have is the image files, so you can do with them whatever you want to do. Rick took that and had stuff printed, and you can use them however you think is appropriate to use them in your local area. We've got MP3 files of a number of audio files that would be appropriate for running on local radio ads. We're going to continue to do those, and we've made all of that stuff available to people. So we've got some here tonight, but you're certainly free to print more. Other questions?
What's your, you want to get rid of the property tax and replace it, or just cut it, or what's the plan?
Yeah, the property tax in Texas is by itself not really a state tax. It's a method of funding local governments and schools. We've got a school finance trial going on. Again, it's kind of a perennial problem for us. It's a $40 billion, $42 billion tax in Texas. So it's not something that you can really talk about eliminating unless you can figure out how then our local government's going to be funded. And I started actually with the plan that Texas Public Policy Foundation advocated. It was eliminating the property tax and using just a broader based sales tax. And what we found when we applied that tax was that you had great disparities in the amount of revenue that would come in. I really believe in limited government principles, and I believe that most of us in this room would agree that service ought to be funded where the service is delivered. This county does not need to be sending resources to some other county to pay for their local roads or to pay for their local law enforcement. You want local law enforcement here, you pay for it here. And when you look at just the sales tax, given the kind of sales tax structure we have today, we reviewed every taxing entity in the 38 counties in Texas that have a population greater than 100,000. And on a sales tax alone model, half of those counties were in the red and half were in the black, which would have required this Robin Hooding of not only schools but also local government. So we don't believe a sales tax by itself works, which took us to Plan B, which was another tax that nobody will like, but it was revenue neutral, and it was just and equitable. It was a gross receipts tax. We couldn't get that tax to a place that was tolerable to business. The rate was too high to make it something that would work. So the third plan, which is the one that Representative George Lavender introduced this last session, is a value-added tax. And you'll all, choke on that because our kind of intuitive reaction is a bad one. We attempted to overcome most of the objections to that. Value-added taxes are bad when they're stacked on top of other taxes. We're looking for a tax that is least distorting to the free market, that's fair, that's just, equitable, transparent, collectible. So this proposal, which is Plan 3, as I said, is a credit model VAT. That means it shows up on the sales receipt. It is really a sales tax. It shows up on the receipt. You pay it on every purchase that you make in Texas. You don't stack it on top of other taxes. And that's when we recognize that the state of Texas has 63 different state taxes. I said our tax structure is broken as evidenced by the fact that we have the second highest level of local debt in the country. We also have 63 different state taxes. How on earth can a business prosper if it's nickeled and dimed with 63 different sorts of taxes? So if you're going to do a value-added tax. You don't stack it on top of 63 other taxes. And that proposal that Lavender introduced eliminates every tax in Texas and gives you a 7% flat value-added sales tax. So it's 7% on every purchase that you make. Doctor bill, 7%. New tires for your car, 7%. Groceries, 7%. No property tax, no sales tax, no franchise tax, no motor vehicle fuels tax. 63 taxes in Texas gone. We're very confident in working with the Comptroller's office that 7% is revenue neutral. We do not have, none of us do not walk out here tonight saying that's a good plan or that's a bad plan, because you don't have the information and I don't have the information to know whether or not it's a good plan. We do not know enough to know whether or not it's a good plan. We know it's probably on the right track towards maybe being a good plan, but that's the best we can do. We need economic impact studies and we need more discussion about that, but we are going to find a way to get rid of the property tax in Texas, and it may just mean completely overhauling the system. When we get there, when we figure out what that is, I don't think we go from this to that overnight. I believe we figure out what the new thing is and we go there gradually. We say we're going from here to there and we do it over probably a 5 or 6 year period where we move incrementally from one place to the next so that we don't have huge unintended consequences and we can kind of see what the effect of that new policy is going to be. I'm committed to finding better tax system for Texas. We have got to be pay as you go. We cannot continue to put it on the credit card, and by golly, if we can't do it in an economy that's booming like this one, we've got a badly broken system. It is unjust to have 63 different taxes in Texas, and nobody's coming up with proposals for how to overhaul that. All we're trying to do is add on more fees. And so I hope you will stick with me on this and help us find the right policy. There were all kinds of questions. Yes, ma'am.
A couple of things. So when you're talking about the local debt, just FYI, in the Comptroller's report currently for 2012, Lubbock is 5th per capita in the state, behind only San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and Dallas.
On local debt?
Here. Per capita.
Okay.
And 7th overall in the dollar amount. But that's behind all of the very biggest states. The other thing, we talk about property tax, and a dirty little secret that should be stopped at the very least, even if we don't change the property tax, is the fact that when property is sold, they include in the new valuation the realtor's commission. So that's adding value to all the properties around us, and it's actually not benefiting either the buyer or the seller.
We're pretty happy with it, though.
I'm sorry about that, Carl. But it really, it's an optional thing, but it adds up to a lot. You just cringe almost when the house sells around in the neighborhood because you know everybody's properties are going to go up by 6% or so.
Well, I'm going to invite everybody in Texas to think again about what tax is. It ought not be punishment and reward. It ought not be carrot and stick. It ought not be, we want these businesses to come, so we're going to give them a credit and we're going to tax everybody.
I'll be excited next week.
What's tax? Tax is supposed to be our fair share of the cost of government service, right? And if we believe in local government and local control, we decide at the local level what those services are going to be, and then we figure out how we're all going to pay a share of that burden. And we've got to quit saying, well, we want to give a credit, and as soon as you start, you know, if it were baseball, and the coach went out to the umpire and said, you know, this guy, he needs a little help. Can he get 4 strikes instead of 3? Or can we walk him after 2 balls instead of 4? Everybody in the stands would call foul, right? You can't do that. The rules are the rules. And yet, when we go make public policy, the first thing we start hearing is exception for this, exception for that, exception for that. That ought to be our first clue. That's not a good proposal. Let's find the things that can apply universally and quit creating all of this disparate system. I'm going to push for that. I won't win all of those arguments, but I'll win a lot of them, and I'm going to keep making them. There was, I think, another question. Yes, sir.
I would like a statement for one thing on your tax proposal as a farmer and paying taxes on the inputs that I have to put into a crop. I'm going to be paying about 4 times more taxes than I am as a property tax. Those are real problems.
We don't, I said credit model that, and I didn't go into that detail, but you raised the question, so let me give you that. We don't know the impact of that yet because we don't have the economic impact study, and I think that's going to be important information for us. But what a credit model system is, for those of us that are the end user, we pay the flat 7%. But for somebody that's making a good or a service, a credit model that is you pay 7% on what you buy, you collect 7% on what you sell, and you only remit the difference between the two. So you're really only paying tax on the increase in value, and we don't know yet how it will affect ag.
Well, the problem is I don't have any control over my product that I sell. I can't add 7% on the price of cotton or corn or these products that I sell. So there has to be something different than what you're getting in my point of view. And I'll go on to the other questions that I have for you. What do you think state policy should be regarding our privately owned underground water?
It's private property. I think we've got some Supreme Court decisions that say it's private property, don't we?
Yes, we do. But in spite of that, we still have bureaucracy such as TCEQ, Texas Water Development Board, CQC, exert control over this private property.
You know, I was one of the very few statewide candidates who opposed Prop 6, and I don't know how much y'all looked at that, but Prop 6 was sold to the voters of Texas as a means to fund water infrastructure, water development. And I tried to make the argument that the water problem in Texas is not primarily a funding problem. We created a $6 billion evergreen funding authority 2 years ago or 4 years ago. We haven't touched any of that money. I believe what's at the heart of water infrastructure development is not primarily finance, it's some other laws that have to do with interbasin transfers and the way our groundwater districts are crafted. And until we get to and begin to address those issues, I don't think we really get to the heart of how we make sure that we've all got enough water in Texas. I don't know the answers to those questions, but they need to have more serious focus and discussion, and we need to acknowledge that water is private property. I believe David Simpson talks a lot about that, and he's from East Texas where there's a lot of water, and he sees that the solutions are in free market principles applying to how the owners of the asset are empowered to sell it and not have it confiscated by government. So I think there again, there's a place where we've got to have some folks that can stand up and articulate the ideas of free market principles to be able to solve some of these problems. We're not going to get there by throwing more government money and confiscation at it. Any other questions?
Give everybody an opportunity to hear that. I asked the question I had a little bit too, but we're getting personal. One of the things that Debra and I both have always somewhat prided ourselves in is that we don't softball the candidates. We ask them the direct questions. I have not even alluded to the question I'm going to ask Debra right now. She has no idea. This was not discussed before. I have family that saw here tonight over this question right here. Saw it on the entire Texas, and I know that's it. Never admitted that that's it. It's not my brother, no way. He's on his way still. But we have extended family that are here, very staunch, conservative, constitutional Righteous comes from like praises and law. All the things that you stand for and that I applaud you for. Most of this crowd and the people that identify with us would see Speaker Strauss at best as a model. And yet, I forget what the guy's name was on the ballot. That this person had referred me to. He talks about, he actually says it's a quote that you have applauded him about some or favored somehow. You probably know what I'm talking about more than I know.
Tony McDonald said Debra Medina boldly endorsed Joe Strauss for Speaker of the House. Is that a pretty direct quote of that piece?
Is it true? Can you address it?
It is patently false. I put out a piece that said, look, I don't endorse people, and I almost never ask anybody to endorse me. I don't think it's good policy. I think we've all seen too many pictures of a candidate. Penny Freeman said, Debra, the last thing you want to do is be seen on stage with your arm around somebody who later said, finds out they're a pedophile or they did. It's just not good policy. Don't do that. And so I don't endorse. I did weigh in on the speaker's race. 2000, when did Strauss first get elected? In 9? The speaker, 11 to 13 is the third term. 2011, y'all will remember that it was a pretty highly contested race. And I wrote a piece talking about the process of speaker. Some of you that have been following me for a while may remember that I sued the Republican Party. Mallory Miller remembers that well. He was a co-plaintiff with me. Good to see you. I sued the Republican Party in 2008 over whether or not it was going to follow its own rules. We were talking about the importance of a deliberative assembly. We were recognizing that our founders understood that you put the right to free assembly in the Constitution because it is in the debate that we find wisdom. It is in being willing to consider the issue broadly that we find the best answers. So when we talk about choosing the Speaker of the Texas House, our principal concern in doing that ought to be to make sure whoever it is, we know first and always that they will follow the rules to ensure, what does Joe Strauss say is going to happen in the Texas House? This is going to be the members' house. We're going to make sure that the will of the members is done. How many of you have heard him say that 1,000 times? Was the will of the members of the Texas House done in this session or in the last session? Absolutely it was not. And unless and until we're able to fight on those ideas, replacing one bully with another bully, whether they agree with us or not, is not going to get us to good public policy. And I hope when we have this argument about who the Speaker ought to be, that it's bigger than whether or not it ought to be Joe Strauss or fill in the blank. It has got to be first about making sure that whoever that is will be a just wielder of the gavel, because I promise you, no matter how much you think you agree with whoever it is you're supporting for that office, there will come a time when you don't agree. And what you need to know when you don't agree is, are you going to get a hearing? Have we put people in power who will even listen to us when we don't agree? So when you tell me that, Debra, that thing you're proposing for tax policy won't work for ag, I better be paying attention, hadn't I? But if all we do is argue about, I want him because we agree all the time, then we are not doing a service to our state. So if you take that to be an endorsement of Strauss, I beg to differ with you. That's the argument that I made. It was not an endorsement of a person. It was a strong case for making sure that we're having the discussion that we ought to be having. And I have since been on record several times saying we did not see the will of the members of the House done in these legislative sessions, and that rests squarely at the feet of Joe Strauss, because the job of the speaker is to make sure that the will of the majority prevails, that the minority is heard, but that the will of the majority prevails. And that has not happened. It didn't happen in the 83rd, and it didn't happen in the 82nd. We had a real close, very narrow majority in the 81st. Remember, it was 76-74. You put one of the 76 in the chair, now it's 75-74, so it's hard to know who the majority was back then. But we knew darn good and well who it was in 2011, and we knew who it was in 2013, and we didn't get, on a number of issues, the will of the majority done. And that rests at the feet of Speaker Strauss. So let's make the argument about that. And that's the position that I took. You might have advanced that argument differently, but it's the argument that I made. It was not an endorsement of Speaker Strauss. Thank you all for coming. On that happy note, we will go out and press forward. I really do appreciate your support. Look at our website. We've got an energetic online community, great Facebook, Medina for Texas website and Facebook at Debra Medina on Twitter. I appreciate the work that you're doing in your community. I can tell y'all are growing. It's good to be back in Lubbock. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debra.